The laughter cut through the conference room like thin ice cracking under weight, and in that instant Marcus Hale felt every year of exhaustion press down on his chest as if gravity had suddenly doubled, because the words thrown at him were not just about flying an aircraft but about his worth as a man, a father, and a dreamer who had already lost too much. If this were you, standing there with tired eyes and a life balanced on fragile hope, would you have swallowed the humiliation or walked away to protect what little dignity you had left? The title he carried in his heart meant more to him than any corporate badge, because before anything else he was a single dad, and his world revolved around a small kitchen table in Ohio where homework papers and cereal bowls mixed with quiet prayers whispered late at night. Marcus had not planned on standing in front of executives in a glass tower overlooking a city that never waited for people like him. Once, years earlier, he had worn a uniform with pride and responsibility stitched into every seam, flying missions that demanded calm nerves and unshakable focus, but life had shifted violently when an accident took his wife during a storm that seemed determined to erase joy from his life. Suddenly there were hospital corridors, unanswered questions, and a little boy named Nathan whose eyes searched for reassurance Marcus was not sure he could give. The military career faded, not from lack of skill but from necessity, because bedtime stories and school drop-offs became his new missions, and survival replaced ambition. He worked odd jobs, studied at night, and believed that if he kept going, something would eventually give, even if his hands shook from fatigue and his heart carried grief like a permanent bruise. The opportunity with the aerospace company came through a referral, the kind of chance people call luck without seeing the years of sacrifice underneath. Marcus believed his experience and integrity would matter, yet the meeting turned cold when the CEO, a polished man named Richard Collins, looked past his resume and saw only a risk that did not fit the brand narrative of effortless success. The remark about proving he could fly first was delivered with a smirk that carried privilege and dismissal in equal measure, and Marcus felt something break inside him. He refused the challenge not out of fear, but because he had learned that chasing validation from those who did not see your humanity could cost you more than it gave. Walking out of that building, he wondered if saying no had closed the last door he could afford to lose, and he imagined Nathan's face if the electricity went out again or the fridge stayed empty. Days passed in the slow rhythm of disappointment, filled with early mornings and late nights where hope felt like a rumor meant for other people. Marcus tried to keep his voice steady while helping Nathan practice spelling words, pretending the weight on his shoulders was just another tired evening. He questioned every decision, replaying the meeting in his head, wondering if pride had betrayed him or if dignity was still worth protecting in a world that seemed to reward silence and compliance. Have you ever stood at the edge of a choice and realized that either direction could break you in different ways, leaving you to guess which pain would hurt less? The phone stayed silent, and Marcus began preparing himself for the idea that his ceiling might be lower than his dreams, that love for his son might mean accepting a smaller life. The call came on a rainy afternoon when the sky matched his mood, and it came from an unfamiliar number that almost went unanswered because Marcus was busy fixing a leaking sink with tools older than his doubts. On the other end was Eleanor Brooks, a senior operations director who had been in that room and had seen something in Marcus that spreadsheets could not measure. She explained that during a routine review, a government contract had come up requiring leadership under pressure, ethical decision-making, and the kind of real-world experience Marcus carried quietly. Richard Collins had resisted at first, but the board demanded results, not ego, and Eleanor made it clear that Marcus's refusal to perform for approval had spoken louder than compliance ever could. In that moment, Marcus felt the ground shift, not into certainty but into possibility, and he realized that sometimes the call you are waiting for comes after you choose yourself. Training resumed not in the sky but in rooms filled with simulations and stress tests, where Marcus's calm presence steadied teams that had never faced real consequences. He worked harder than ever, fueled not by revenge but by responsibility, knowing that every success echoed back to Nathan's future. Slowly, respect replaced skepticism, and even Richard Collins began to recognize the cost of underestimating someone who had already survived loss. Marcus was offered the role not as a trophy but as a trust, leading a program that would protect lives and redefine safety standards. On the day he signed the contract, he did not celebrate with champagne but with a quiet dinner at home, watching Nathan laugh over a silly story, realizing that destiny had not changed because someone believed in him, but because he had refused to abandon himself. Years later, standing near a runway during a demonstration flight he oversaw, Marcus watched the aircraft rise smoothly into the sky, and he felt a familiar calm settle in his chest. He thought about the man he had been when laughter tried to shrink him, and the father he had become through nights of fear and resolve. Success had not erased the pain, but it had given it meaning, shaping a life built on resilience rather than approval. If you were in his place, would you remember that no one gets to define your worth without your consent, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no and wait for the right call? Just before the aircraft disappeared into the clouds, Marcus closed his eyes and thanked God not for the height he had reached, but for the strength that carried him there. If this story stirred something inside you, share in the comments what moment spoke to your heart the most. And if it truly touched your soul, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, so more stories of hope, dignity, and second chances can reach those who need them most.